The Woman in Black, A Sister's Shadow. Chapter 1. The Echo of a Loss. Charleston, South Carolina, 2024. The air in Charleston always carried the scent of salt and history. A city of cobblestone streets and ancient live oaks draped in Spanish moss. But for me, Amelia Vance, it was also a city steeped in a more personal, profound history. The memory of my sister, Clara. She would have been 35 this year. She died on her 15th birthday. A bright, vibrant spark extinguished too soon by a reckless drunk driver who fled the scene, never to be found. Her birthday, July 17th, remained etched in my heart. A day of bittersweet remembrance. My parents, deeply religious, found solace in the familiar rituals of our faith. Every year, without fail, they organized a special memorial service at St. Philip's Church, our family's church for generations. It was a beautiful, historic building, its steeple piercing the Charleston skyline, its stained glass windows casting colorful patterns on ancient pews. The service was small, intimate, attended by close family and a few dear friends who remembered Clara. For 20 years, this had been our ritual. Every July 17th, we gathered to sing her favorite hymns, listen to the comforting words of Reverend Davies, and share quiet anecdotes about the girl we lost too soon. It was a day of shared grief, a quiet acknowledgement of the hole Clara had left in our lives. But for the past 5 years, a new, unsettling element had become part of our solemn tradition. A woman in black. She would appear precisely at 10 a.m., just as the service was about to begin. Always dressed in a long, flowing black dress, a wide-brimmed black hat that obscured most of her face, and a delicate black lace veil. She sat in the very last pew, a solitary pew, somber silhouette against the bright light streaming through the arched windows. She never spoke, never moved, just sat there, utterly still, throughout the entire service. As soon as Reverend Davies delivered the final blessing, she would rise, turn, and slip out of the church as silently as she had arrived, disappearing into the Charleston streets without a trace. The first year she appeared, 2019, my parents and I exchanged puzzled glances. "Who is that?" my mother whispered. We assumed she was a stranger, perhaps a tourist who had stumbled into the service, or someone who had mistaken it for a regular Sunday Mass. But then she came back the next year, and the year after that. Always the same woman, always in black, always in the same pew, always leaving silently. Her presence became an unsettling enigma, a silent intrusion into our private grief. My father, a man of quiet patience, was initially inclined to ignore her. "Perhaps she is a soul in need of comfort, Amelia," he suggested, "or someone who knew Clara we don't remember." But we knew everyone who knew Clara. Our circle was small, our memories of her vivid. No one remembered a woman like this. She never approached us, never offered condolences, never even acknowledged our presence. She was simply there, a dark, silent sentinel. My mother, more sensitive and prone to worry, began to find her presence increasingly disturbing. "It's eerie, Amelia," she'd murmur, "like a bad omen. Who is she? What does she want?" I, too, found myself consumed by a quiet obsession with the woman in black. Her silent vigil felt profound, almost ritualistic. Was she connected to Clara? Was she a witness to the accident? Or something far stranger? The unsolved nature of Clara's hit and run had always left a gaping wound in our family, a longing for answers, for justice. The woman in black seemed to carry a piece of that unspoken mystery. Each year, as July 17th approached, the question would surface: would she come again? And each year, she did, a silent, unmoving presence that felt both sorrowful and profoundly unsettling. She was a shadow, cast over our grief, an echo within the echo of our loss. This year, as Clara's 35th birthday approached, the woman in black weighed heavily on my mind. My parents had decided that this year we would hold a smaller, even more private gathering at home, foregoing the church service. We had hoped to escape her silent vigil, to reclaim our private grief without her mysterious presence. But 2 days before Clara's birthday, an anonymous, unmarked envelope arrived at our home. Inside, a single black and white photograph. It was a grainy, old photo of a young girl, no older than 10, standing beside a small white dog. The girl looked strikingly like Clara. And on the back, in elegant, looping script, a single sentence: "She knows what happened." My blood ran cold. The photograph was clearly of Clara. But who would send it? And the message, "She knows what happened," did it refer to the woman in black? Did she know something about the accident? The hit and run that had haunted us for 2 decades? The woman in black was no longer just a silent, mysterious presence. She was a catalyst, a harbinger of a truth that had been buried for 20 years. Her silent vigil was no longer just an unsettling ritual. It was a desperate plea, a breadcrumb leading to an answer we had long stopped hoping for. The echo of Clara's loss was about to meet the unsettling reality of a woman who held a secret that threatened to shatter our quiet grief and unleash a long-buried truth. Chapter 2. The Silent Witness. The arrival of the anonymous photograph and the chilling message, "She knows what happened," transformed the woman in black from an eerie enigma into a potential key to my sister Clara's unsolved hit and run. My parents were beside themselves with a mix of trepidation and desperate hope. Could this truly be a lead after 20 years? We canceled the intimate home gathering for Clara's birthday. My father, with a renewed sense of purpose, contacted Reverend Davies at St. Philip's Church. "We need to hold the service this year, Reverend," he stated, his voice firm, "and we need to be prepared." My parents were torn. On one hand, the hope of finally getting answers, of finding the person responsible for Clara's death, was overwhelming. On the other, the fear of what that truth might reveal and the potential for false hope weighed heavily on them. I, however, felt a surge of adrenaline, a determination to unravel this mystery. The woman in black was no longer just an unsettling presence. She was a target, a silent witness I had to reach. July 17th dawned, gray and overcast, matching the somber mood that hung over our family. We arrived at St. Philip's Church well before 10 a.m., my heart pounding with anticipation. The familiar scent of old wood and beeswax filled the air, a comforting scent usually, but today it was charged with tension. Precisely at 10 a.m., the heavy oak doors at the back of the church creaked open, and there she was, the woman in black. Her long dress flowed around her, her wide-brimmed hat and veil obscuring her face, making her a spectral figure. She walked with the same slow, deliberate pace, heading directly for her usual pew at the very back. My eyes never left her. My parents sat beside me, their hands clasped, their gaze also fixed on the silent figure. As she settled into the pew, her silhouette against the muted light, Reverend Davies began the service, his voice a comforting drone, but I heard none of it. My focus was solely on the woman in black. During the hymns, during the sermon, during the prayers, she remained utterly still, a statue carved from shadow. I tried to catch her eye, to discern any movement, any sign of emotion, but her veil was an impenetrable barrier. As Reverend Davies uttered the final blessing, my heart began to pound. This was it, her moment of exit. She rose, as always, with the same silent grace. She turned, her back to us, and began to walk slowly towards the doors. "Wait!" I called out, my voice cutting through the hushed reverence of the church, echoing loudly in the vast space. She paused. Her back remained to me, but she stopped, perfectly still. My parents gasped quietly beside me. A few other attendees stirred, looking from me to the woman in black. I walked towards her, my steps firm, my heart hammering against my ribs. As I approached, I could feel the palpable tension in the air. "Please," I said, my voice softer now, but filled with desperate urgency. "Please don't go. We need to talk. About Clara, about the photograph, about what you know." She remained still for a long moment. Then slowly, almost imperceptibly, she turned. Her veiled face was still obscured, but I felt the weight of her gaze. Then, to my astonishment, she slowly, deliberately, lifted her veiled hand, and with a trembling movement, reached up and lifted the black veil. The hat still shadowed her face, but the veil was gone. And beneath it, I saw her eyes. They were pale, almost translucent blue, filled with an ancient sorrow, a profound grief that mirrored my own. And there was something else in them, a desperate plea, a fragile hope. "I knew her," she whispered, her voice raspy, as if unused to speaking. "I knew Clara." My parents, who had followed me, stood a few feet behind, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and dawning recognition. "Who are you?" my mother asked, her voice barely a whisper. "And how did you know our Clara?" The woman in black took a shaky breath. "My name is Amelia Vance," she said, her voice stronger now, but still trembling. I am Clara's aunt, your sister Sarah." She looked directly at my mother, her pale blue eyes filled with an unbearable sorrow. "Your estranged sister." The revelation hit my mother like a physical blow. Her hand flew to her mouth, stifling a cry. Eleanor, my mother's younger sister, who had disappeared from our lives nearly 30 years ago after a bitter family dispute, never to be heard from again. She had been a ghost in our family history, a name whispered with regret and sadness. Eleanor's gaze shifted to me. "I was there, Amelia, the night Clara died. I saw it all." Her voice cracked, tears finally streaming down her face, stark against the paleness of her skin. "I saw the car, the man. I know who killed Clara." The words hung in the hallowed silence of St. Philip's, a bombshell dropped into the heart of our carefully contained grief. The woman in black, the silent witness, was family, and she held the key to the 2-decade-old mystery that had haunted our lives. The echo of our loss was about to become a roaring torrent of truth, threatening to sweep us away in its unforgiving current. Chapter 3. The Confession in the Quiet Room. The revelation that the woman in black was Amelia Vance, my mother's long-lost sister and Clara's aunt, sent seismic waves through our family. My mother, Sarah, collapsed into my father's arms, overwhelmed by the sudden return of a sister she thought lost forever, combined with the bombshell of Eleanor's confession. Reverend Davies, with his customary grace, led us to a private meeting room within St. Philip's Church, a quiet, sunlit space typically used for counseling. Eleanor, still dressed in her somber black attire, sat across from us, her face now fully visible, though still pale and etched with profound sorrow. Her features, though aged and marked by what appeared to be years of hardship, were undeniably my mother's sister. The same high cheekbones, the same shape of the eyes, though Eleanor's were filled with an almost unbearable pain. "Eleanor," my mother whispered, her voice choked with emotion, reaching across the table to grasp her sister's trembling hand. "Where have you been? Why didn't you ever come back?" Eleanor squeezed her hand, tears silently tracing paths down her face. After the fight, Sarah, I was so ashamed, so angry. I left Charleston, went to New Orleans, tried to start over. But I never forgot you. Never forgot this family." She paused, taking a shaky breath. "And I never forgot Clara." She then began to speak, her voice raspy at first, then growing stronger as the words poured out, a torrent of suppressed truth. Her confession was not just an explanation of her presence, but a harrowing account of the night Clara died. "I came back to Charleston a few months before Clara's 15th birthday," Eleanor began, her gaze distant, lost in the past. "I was struggling, trying to find my way. I didn't want to show myself to you, not yet. I was too ashamed of where I was in my life. But I wanted to see you, to see if you were okay. And I saw Clara. She was so beautiful, so full of life, just like you were, Sarah, at that age." Her voice trembled. "On her birthday, I was walking near your house, just watching. I saw Clara ride off on her bicycle. She was so happy. She was going to meet friends at the park, she told me once, from a distance." Eleanor's eyes, filled with unshed tears, fixed on us. And then I saw it. A dark blue sedan, speeding down the road, way too fast. I saw it swerve, and then it hit her. My mother let out a strangled cry, burying her face in my father's shoulder. I felt a cold dread, but also a fierce need to hear every detail. The car didn't stop. Eleanor continued, her voice gaining a desperate urgency. "It just sped away. I screamed. I ran to her, but it was too late. I saw the driver, just for a second, through the back window as they fled. A man, young, and on the back bumper, there was a small, distinct sticker. A yellow sun with a lightning bolt through it. A surfing sticker. A surfing sticker." My father gasped. We had lived near the beach, near Folly Beach, when Clara was younger. Surfing was a popular pastime, but we had never had any leads on the car. "I was in shock," Eleanor whispered, her voice breaking. "I was terrified. I saw what happened, but I was living on the streets, no ID, no real place to go. I knew no one would believe me. I was a mess. I ran. I kept running, but I never forgot that car, or that sticker." She had been a silent witness, a transient, unable to come forward. The guilt, the fear, had consumed her. She had carried this immense burden for 20 years. "Every year," she said, her voice softer now, "I would come to her service, to mourn her, to try and find some peace, to punish myself for not doing more, and to see you, to see if you were okay. The photograph she sent, I found it a few months ago," Eleanor explained, "in an old box of my things from when I lived here. It was Clara's from when she was little, a photo she gave me once. I sent it because I knew I couldn't carry the secret anymore. I had to tell you. I hoped it would bring you to me, make you ask." Her confession was a raw, agonizing unraveling of 2 decades of unspoken grief and buried guilt. My mother, though heartbroken by the circumstances, held her sister's hand, offering comfort even as the terrible truth unfolded. My father, usually composed, sat stunned, tears silently streaming down his face. The yellow sun with the lightning bolt. It was a small detail, but it was concrete. A lead. After 20 years of silence, of unanswered questions, of a perpetrator free, the woman in black had not just appeared to mourn Clara. She had come to finally deliver the truth, a truth she had carried for far too long. The quiet room in St. Philip's Church had become the confessional for a 2-decade-old secret, a secret that promised not just justice, but a reckoning, a painful yet necessary unraveling of our family's enduring grief. The silent witness had finally spoken. Chapter 4. The Hunt for Justice. The confession from Eleanor, our long-lost aunt, ignited a fierce, renewed determination for justice within our family. The detail of the yellow sun with a lightning bolt surfing sticker on the hit-and-run driver's car was the first concrete lead we had in 20 years. My father, a retired police detective, immediately sprang into action. He was a man of meticulous detail and unwavering resolve. He knew the initial police investigation had gone cold quickly due to lack of witnesses or vehicle descriptions. Now, with Eleanor's testimony, we had a starting point. Eleanor, though frail, was remarkably clear in her recall of that night. Her memory of the car's color, a dark blue sedan, and the distinct sticker was vivid. She had carried that image, that burden, for 2 decades. My father assured her that her past circumstances did not diminish the validity of her eyewitness account. In fact, her vulnerability made her an even more poignant witness to a terrible injustice. The first step was to approach the Charleston Police Department. My father, using his connections, managed to get us a meeting with the cold case unit. Eleanor, despite her fear, agreed to recount her testimony to the police. Her story, corroborated by the fact that she had been present at Clara's memorial services for 5 years, silently carrying this secret, added a powerful weight to her claims. The police took her seriously. The surfing sticker detail, though seemingly small, was unique. The cold case unit began their painstaking work. They scoured old police reports, looking for any mention of similar vehicles, any registered dark blue sedans in the Charleston area around 2004 that might have been involved in other incidents or even minor traffic violations around the time of Clara's death. They reached out to surfing communities, local surf shops, and online forums, trying to identify that specific sticker. Meanwhile, my mother, Sarah, focused on reconnecting with Eleanor. Their reunion was fraught with years of unspoken pain, but beneath the sorrow, a tentative sisterly bond began to reemerge. Eleanor moved in with us temporarily, a quiet, haunted presence, slowly adjusting to a life off the streets. We gently encouraged her to seek counseling to deal with the trauma she had endured and the crushing guilt she had carried. Weeks turned into months. The investigation was slow, frustrating. The sticker was proving elusive. Many surfing brands used sun designs, but the lightning bolt element was less common. Then a breakthrough. A retired police officer, whom my father had known, remembered a small, local surf shop near Folly Beach that had custom-made decals. He recalled a specific limited edition sticker from the early 2000s, a yellow sun with a jagged lightning bolt through it, designed for a local surfing competition. The shop, long since closed, had been popular with a small, tight-knit group of local surfers. The police tracked down the former owner of the surf shop, now living in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. He provided old sales records, including a list of customers who had purchased that specific decal in 2004. The list was short: One name on that list leapt out: Richard "Rick" Harmon. He had been a minor local surfing celebrity back then, known for his recklessness and his dark blue sedan. He had also had a minor traffic infraction report filed against him a few weeks after Clara's death, involving reckless driving, but the incident had been dismissed due to lack of evidence. The police now had a suspect. They began to build a case against Rick Harmon, quietly gathering current information, checking his whereabouts over the past 20 years. He was now a respected businessman, running a successful chain of outdoor adventure stores across the South, with headquarters in Asheville, North Carolina. He lived a life of apparent normalcy, a ghost of his past lurking beneath the surface. The evidence mounted. Old photographs of Rick Harmon's car, found through his social media and old online forums, clearly showed the distinctive yellow sun and lightning bolt sticker. Cell tower data from the night of Clara's death, painstakingly reanalyzed, placed a cell phone registered to Rick Harmon in the vicinity of the accident. Even a witness from the traffic infraction report from 2004, when re-interviewed, recalled seeing a similar sticker on Harmon's car. The police had their man. On the eve of what would have been Clara's 36th birthday, almost a year after Eleanor's confession, Rick Harmon was arrested at his home in Asheville, North Carolina. The charges: vehicular manslaughter and hit and run, 20 years after the fact. The news ripped through our family like a wildfire, a mix of profound relief and raw, overwhelming emotion. 20 years. 20 years of unanswered prayers, of suppressed anger, of a perpetrator walking free. And now justice was finally within reach. Eleanor, too, felt a profound release. The burden she had carried for so long was finally lifted. Her brave confession, her willingness to face her past, had led to this moment. The silent witness had initiated a hunt for justice that had finally culminated in the capture of a man who thought he had escaped his past. The road ahead was still long, a trial, the reliving of a nightmare. But the first crucial step had been taken. The dark blue sedan, the yellow sun with the lightning bolt, a memory etched in the heart of a grieving aunt, now becoming the key to unlocking 2 decades of silence and sorrow, finally leading us toward the painful yet necessary dawn of justice. Chapter 5: The Unspoken Peace. The arrest of Rick Harmon sent shockwaves through our family and the Charleston community. Justice, after 20 years of agonizing silence, finally seemed within reach. The trial was long, emotionally draining, and brought back every painful memory of Clara's last moments. Eleanor, fragile but resolute, testified as the key eyewitness, her harrowing account of the hit and run painting a vivid picture for the jury. Her bravery, her willingness to face her past, was a testament to her love for Clara. Rick Harmon, now a successful businessman, maintained his innocence, but the overwhelming evidence meticulously gathered by the cold case unit, including Eleanor's testimony, the surf shop records, the old photos, and the reanalyzed cell tower data, proved irrefutable. After weeks of testimony, the jury delivered a guilty verdict: vehicular manslaughter, hit and run. He received a substantial prison sentence. The moment the verdict was read, a collective sigh of relief, heavy with 20 years of unshed tears, swept through the courtroom. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about acknowledgement. It was about Clara, her life, finally recognized, and her death finally accounted for. For my parents, Sarah and Robert, it was a profound release. The burden of the unanswered questions, the agony of the unknown, had finally been lifted. They could, for the first time, truly begin to process their grief, no longer shackled by the elusive specter of injustice. My mother and Eleanor, once estranged, now clung to each other, their shared sorrow, and now their shared sense of justice, forging an unbreakable bond between them. For me, Amelia, the trial and verdict brought a sense of completion. The woman in black had led us to this moment, had shattered our quiet grief, but in doing so, had opened the door to truth. I had spent 2 decades searching for answers, and Eleanor, in her silent vigil, had been holding them all along. Eleanor, after the trial, continued her healing journey. She sought professional counseling, slowly shedding the layers of fear and guilt that had defined her life for so long. She found a quiet peace living with my parents, rediscovering the warmth of family. She spent hours in Clara's old room, reading her journals, looking at her photographs, connecting with the niece she had silently mourned for so long. She even started volunteering at a local animal shelter in Charleston, finding solace in the quiet companionship of abandoned creatures, a testament to the small white dog from the photograph she had sent. Our family ritual on July 17th changed. We still went to St. Philip's Church, but now Eleanor sat with us in the family pew, not in the back. Her black veil was gone, replaced by a simple, elegant scarf. She no longer came as a silent, anonymous sentinel, but as a cherished member of our family, a survivor who had brought us closure. We still honored Clara, but now our prayers were also for Eleanor, for her bravery, for her newfound peace. The small white dog from the anonymous photograph turned out to be a stray Clara had briefly befriended near her home, a detail Eleanor remembered because Clara had shown her the photo shortly before her death. It was a poignant detail, a tiny thread connecting their lives. Years passed. Rick Harmon served his sentence. The woman in black became a quiet legend in our family, a testament to the enduring power of truth and the unexpected paths to justice. The initial fear she had instilled in us transformed into profound gratitude. Clara's memory lived on, not as a gaping wound of unsolved tragedy, but as a beloved presence, her spirit finally at peace. And for Eleanor, her silence had been a burden, but her voice, when she finally found it, had been the catalyst for an extraordinary act of justice, bringing a fractured family back together and allowing all of us to finally embrace an unspoken peace. The shadows of the past had receded, replaced by the gentle dawn of truth, bringing a resolution that had been 2 decades in the making, finally allowing us to heal and to truly remember Clara, not just in sorrow, but in newfound peace.